All right, Jeff, and I'm back again. So, figured again, while I'm all set up, let's go ahead and do a second video for the day just to show the new stuff that I did get in. It's not much, but hey, let's get it covered. So, yes, as I've mentioned before, I still have records that are out there that have been sitting out there in limbo that are supposed to be here and have been not here for a couple weeks now. I have one that made it all the way to DC over the right before the weekend. I thought for sure when they hit DC, which is just up the road, a couple hours, when they hit DC, they tend to come to me the next day. Well, it's still sitting in DC, and as of last night, it's still sitting in DC. And sadly, I just saw the postal man. They get out. Usually, the mailman comes in the middle of the day, but I guess with Christmas and everything, I've seen them out as early as 7 a.m. They bought packages to me at 7 a.m. a couple weeks ago, and I saw him just drive by when I was making that previous video, and he did not come to my house. So I'm a little sad. I expected at least one thing to come today, but and you never know. Now, I'm not saying he brings stuff around, but there have been plenty of times where he'll get done with his route and realize, oh, hey, I've still got a package in there, and he'll bring it by. So he may come by later. One of the places that I go on a fairly frequent basis, they have a guy that comes in who supplies the record store with new used records periodically. I forget what day of the week it always used to be, but anyway, so I went in there Friday evening because my wife had to go pick up my daughter. So I said, drop me off at the record store, and by the time you get done picking her up and coming back down this road, I'll be done. I wanted to go in and see again what record store day leftovers they might have had. I wanted to go ahead and take a look and see if they had some stuff, filed away. And then I went through and looked at the new records. Now I noticed when I walked in, the guy who brings in the records and supplies them was there. And I thought, usually by the time I can get down there, he'll bring the stuff in. And by the time I get in there, people have already picked through if there's anything good. It's rare that I find anything good in there. But here he is putting stuff out while I'm there. I'm like, hey, this is perfect timing. There's like nobody else here. So I jump and start looking through. And sure enough, I found a couple things in the used bin that I was, excited to have. Great Whites Recovery Live. Hey, it's not often at this store, period, that I find much 80s metal or 80s, great music from the 80s at that point. So this is there, and it's in, like, great condition. And then I realized, now I did not have this record back in the day. This is, this is mid 80s. This is that time period in life where I wasn't listening to this kind of music. I was diverted my attention elsewhere. So I had the early Great White stuff, but I kind of missed the middle stuff into the 90s. But I have digital tracks that I've accumulated over the years. I have a Japanese version of this, and I have a version of this that also has On Your Knees. And then I got this, and I realized that this is different from those digital versions. So it's weird. When I was just doing some of the little research to see what the differences were, and I can't even 100% tell you exactly why. But so this has a 1986 side, which is basically them doing Immigrant Song. This is kind of where they started with the whole Led Zeppelin feel and everything, where they've done Led Zeppelin covers in the future after this. Immigrant Song and Rock and Roll, Money, That's What I Want, Red House, I Don't Need No Doctor. So you got that. It's kind of like Live in the Studio 86. And then 1983, some live tracks from a concert. Hard and Cold, Substitute, from their early album. Street Killer, Stick It, Bad Boy. Great stuff. Early, this is from like the early years, which is when I really enjoyed them. But now you go and you get the Japanese version, and like none of those songs are on there. Or well, a couple of them are, but just a couple. And then other songs that I didn't track down where those songs come from. But it's kind of like a whole CD of other tracks. And then you got the American version with On Your Knees, and it has the On Your Knees EP, which is actually, it's their first EP before their first album, and it was reissued and called On Your Knees. So that was added to a CD version, and you got that, and then you got a lot of these tracks. So there's some versions out there digitally, CD-wise, that are different. So I didn't even have, on the version I had, it seems like some of these songs were not on there. So anyway, I was glad to get that, and I was surprised, it was in great shape. So, and then I picked up Heaven, Where Angels Fear to Tread. Now, I've never had this album. I've had the first Heaven album, and I've had the third Heaven CD. I really like this album. I think that this stands out as better than what I remember when I had the first album. I still want to get the first album. And the third album, was a little different. But this ended up being really good. And again, it was in just superb condition. I think it's interesting because you got the band on the front of the first album. I almost thought it was the same picture. It's like the rocks, the outfits, but if you compare the outfits on the first album, they're not all, some of them might be similar, but they're not all wearing this is not the same. So same scenery and everything. And this is an Australian band. They have very similar sounds to me of some of the early AC/DC. But, they occasionally throw in horns and stuff. But they're hard rocking. They just kind of sound, like a little bit of the AC/DC sound. Not an AC/DC clone, just great stuff. But yeah, so it was great to find a couple decent things from the 80s that in this store that somebody else had not grabbed up. Then we went shopping. This is just a brief story here because we went shopping at Best Buy because we had to get some Christmas presents. And of course, if you have a Best Buy card and you buy X amount of dollars, you get X amount of months of no interest on your financing. So I thought, well, let's go there and get some of the electronics. We had to get Grandpa this. We had to get the son this or whatever. I said, we can do this and get up to at least enough money to do the yearly financing. And there's the record man. There's the mailman, and he brought me nothing. Anyway, we can get at least enough to do some, 1-year financing. But then we had a question as to whether we had enough, and so I'm like, I can go get a record. And so I went and got a record. Turns out we had way too much. I didn't really need the record, but hey, I got a record out of the deal. I picked up Dio's Magica because I was surprised to even find that at Best Buy. It's kind of getting a little harder to find. It's a double album set. It's got a 7-inch bonus. It's got the lenticular cover. And I'm like, I'm going to get this. I'll grab this. And then I get home, and I look at it, and I look at it, and I check it, and I double check it, and it turns out I've got two. It's a double disc set, double LP set, and it turns out I've got both LP number 2. So I'm missing the whole first album, and then the second album, the second side of the second album is nothing but the Magica story, narration. So you only get a couple songs on the third side, and then sides 1 and 2 were totally gone. The 7-inch was there. So then I'm like, what should I do? Whatever. So I wrote the company on Saturday, and I didn't even give it a chance to receive. They probably, maybe it was Friday. I wrote them on Friday because that's when we picked that up. And I haven't given them a chance to respond. Who knows? Big company like BMG, whether they'll ever respond. I decided yesterday to go ahead. I went to a Christmas party on Saturday, ended up getting a Best Buy gift card. So I went ahead and took the record back to Best Buy. I looked online. It's even back ordered on the BestBuy.com site, so I couldn't even trade it in there. And so I took it back, got my money back on a gift card, and went on BestBuy.com and bought a couple albums to replace them. So anyway, I did not keep the Magica. And that's really weird. I know it happens. People get doubles. It kind of happens. So I will pass on that for now. Anyway, that is all for now. Mailman didn't bring me anything, so that makes me sad unless he comes back later. And I may not be back anytime real soon until something else comes in. Until then, rock on.